Thank you, and really good to be here for life, all of life, especially life that's most vulnerable and has no voice. The beauty about it, what if I don't want to tonight? We don't do double? Do you need me on this?
No, either one. Either one is fine, whatever you like.
I do want to say we're sending around an invitation to you to join the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. The death penalty. It is an invitation. Don't feel because the clipboard passes you that you have to sign that or you're being a bad person. Because the death penalty is a tough one, and we're going to get into it tonight. You may not be there yet. And so just know that's purely invitation. Now, after I have a go at you for an hour, if you don't sign it, then you're in trouble. Teasing, of course. We have wonderful groups here. You know, the Consistent Life group is here tonight. And they're wonderful because they take all the issues of the unborn, the abortion issue, to protect. I mean, that's the very first step. If you don't get born, all the other rights that you can talk about all become moot. And so, of course, life from the womb to the tomb. Without people getting in there and deciding you, and you do not deserve to live. So we're gonna take the consistent ethic of life and against using violence to solve human problems. That's the basic in all of it for life. So peace and not having war is integral to working for life, as is protecting the unborn or people with Alzheimer's who don't know their name, and people say it'd be much better for them if we just help them get over to the other side, or euthanasia. And so all of the issues of life come to play. And Consistent Life is also out there, and you may want to go to their table. They'll be right next to my table. And then, of course, you have the group here in Maryland. They've been doing fantastic work. And you are very close in Maryland to ending the death penalty. You've never been terribly serious about it. I mean, you know, you haven't given many death sentences at all. People, like in the Deep South, we're the real practitioners of death. The 10 southern states that practice slavery big time are the practitioners of the executions. And maybe by the end of tonight, you'll understand that a little bit better when I take you through it. So it's called CASE. And it's Citizens Against State Executions here in Maryland, and they have a table too. Okay. It's been an incredible journey for me. You get involved with Jesus, and Jesus has a way of exploding on us, of suddenly awakening to new dimensions of life that we never had before. And the book I'm writing now is called River of Fire, The Spiritual Journey to Death Row. And it's quite something to go back and tell the story of your life, and how faith unfurls, and how consciousness unfurls, and even morality, like, oh, I didn't know it meant this. With the Holy Spirit guiding us, and because we're part of community, and that's the beauty of being a person of faith in a tradition. We're part of a community that leads us to prayer. You know, we gather in a worship space that has an execution right in front of us. Now, often Jesus is depicted as resurrected, but Jesus was killed on the stake. Jesus was executed as a criminal by the Romans. And it took 400 years in the believing community of the followers of Jesus to dare to hold up a symbol of execution as a sign of our faith. And the ancient Christians, the first followers, never put the body of Jesus on the cross because they wanted to stress that Jesus was not contained in death and the resurrected Jesus. But we come up against symbols of execution every time. When we do the sign of the cross, we're doing the sign of the way that the Romans executed people. The young Jesus on his way to Jerusalem might have seen 1,000 people on those poles, a vertical one and a horizontal one, that basically said, don't mess with Rome. And that was a way of saying, you do anything against us, and this is the way we treat you. As though violence and the use of violence can ever be redemptive. And we come from a long, long history of using violence. In terms of waking up, we can't until we wake up, which is the Holy Spirit's job in us and belonging to community. Well, then we operate within a certain consciousness, almost like a little terrarium. You know, you have a globe over it, and you just kind of recycle your stuff and have pretty much the same conversations. And when I was in high school at St. Joseph Academy in Baton Rouge, we never even had the issue of the death penalty come up. It was just taken for granted that the traditional teaching of the church was people who did these terrible crimes, that it was okay for the state to execute them to protect us, the citizens. It was always about defense. And I didn't even know it. Right down the street from Broussard Street, where our academy was in Baton Rouge, there was a Baton Rouge jail, and they had a portable electric chair that they'd bring to the different cities to execute people, electrocute them to death for crimes, and I didn't even know what was going on. One time I gave a talk at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, and right down the street, maybe 5 blocks away from this school, is the busiest killing chamber in the United States. And I was talking to the students that night, and I said, it could be in India. It's so far removed from our life. Whoever meets anybody on death row, whoever gets even close to this, I never dreamed I would. And when I joined the Sisters of St. Joseph, and the first thing was I taught in a school, 7th and 8th grade in Cabrini. And I have Trudy here tonight. I mean, she was with me at Cabrini, and then in the youth group in our parish. And so things unfurl. It's kind of like a rose. It's like the petals unfurl in our life. And there's a gentleness in it. You know, the Holy Spirit works with us patiently, gradually. Open those petals to the sun, to a fuller and fuller of understanding what it means to follow Jesus as a disciple. And it's always linked to life. What did Jesus say? I have come that you may have life to the full. Not just be living, but be alive, be fully alive. It's all about life. So I joined the sisters, I taught. Then I was one of the first ones to become a director of religious ed, which is how I met Trudy, because we had a youth group in the parish. And so it began, the debate began. See, when you belong to a community, there's always this fermentation going on in community. You ever notice things are never completely calm when you're young? I mean, there's somebody saying, what about this? Or, well, what about that? And stirring it up, just always stirring it up. If we wanted to go into a peaceful little lagoon off somewhere, just get on our little raft and sip our lemonade, then don't belong to a faith community. Because it's always going to be stirred up. And so what happened among the sisters was that it was about the social justice, see? Some of our sisters had been down in Latin America, where it was one of the first times, like if you were a catechist and you were caught with a Bible in your suitcase, you could be killed. Because the ones who were the church was aligned with the struggles of the poor, and they began calling them communists. And they began killing people. The 6 Jesuits were killed in El Salvador. You had people being killed because, don't tell me you're religious, you mixed it up with politics. Well, what did that mean? You know what politics meant was they were taking the side of the poor people who were struggling against real oppression in Nicaragua. Somoza killed people, tortured people. There's a cliff right outside of Managua where the disappeared and those who had been tortured were thrown off the cliff. And the families would have to come to try to find the bodies of their suffering, of their children who had disappeared, their husbands who had disappeared, their sons who had disappeared. And this went on for years. Went on for years. And there was never a voice raised about Somoza because our country kind of supported Somoza. There's a famous thing that one of the presidents said, I think it was President Johnson, well, he may be a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. Excuse the language. But that was said by the president. I mean, what did it mean? Well, you know, in these countries, you know, you're not going to have perfect democracy, but at least the dictator of the country will be our person. And so here we are, Sister St. Joseph, our little community down in the south, and Sister Margie Navarra had been down in Central America, and she was right in there, see? So she's coming back up to the meetings, and they're challenging us, because they're saying, why is it that we don't have many sisters engaged directly in social justice, engaged directly with poor people? Well, I didn't get it. And we had these open debates, and I'm up there at the mic, and I'm saying things like, Jesus, the kingdom of Jesus is not of this world. I mean, you know, people, not by bread alone do people live. It's a spiritual kingdom. And I'm spiritual. I'm apolitical. It's all about teaching people about God, and if the poor have God, they have everything. Well, you know, the only problem was I didn't know any real poor people. And in New Orleans, literally 5 blocks down the road from our mother house, which, by the way, is completely destroyed by Katrina, many, many places. We had 80% of our city underwater. The devastation in New Orleans is too big even to comprehend, even those of us who have been there. And right down the block was one of the major housing projects with struggling African-American people, and I'd never been to any of them. Like, there was this little girl at the time who wrote the essay called The Poor Family. Once it was a very poor family. The mother was poor, the father was poor, the children were poor, the butler was poor, the chauffeur was poor, the gardener was poor, the whole family was poor. Well, I could have written that essay, because I don't even know my own neighbors. And see, I came up in privilege. I never knew that, never used that word. But my daddy was a successful lawyer. I went to a private school. I had never known African-American people as my peers. They were always our servants. And I was in a segregated school, just with other white kids. I had no idea what was going on there. I knew it wasn't good. I knew baby people were suffering. And the waking up when it happens to us, when there's just this explosion, where's this radical turn, it's always gift. We cannot cause our own conversion. We cannot all of a sudden get it. When we get an insight, or when we go, oh, that's God in us, that's Holy Spirit in us, waking us up. And it happened to me, we went to this meeting, I wasn't for going to the meeting, but they put us all on buses, we all went up to Derwood, Indiana, and this social justice nun coming to talk to us for 3 whole blooming days. And I was saying, we are nuns, we are not social workers, all we got to do is teach people about God, bring them on retreats, but don't get all this social justice stuff. And then here we are going to be for 3 days. I said, well, maybe with the grace of God, I can come through unscathed. She's going to be doing all that social justice. We've got to get involved with public housing. We've got to get involved with the poor. Everybody's poor in the eyes of God. First day I did come through unscathed because Sister Maria Gustinea was her name. She taught at Emmanuel College in Boston for 40 years, and she taught sociology, so she knew what was happening on the ground, and she taught the New Testament. She taught Jesus, and she had been given to us. And here's the benefit of belonging to a community. Sometimes you get corralled into things. I went fighting and kicking and screaming all the way up on that bus to Derwood, where this nun's going to talk to us. And here on the second day, kaboom. And it was Jesus that got me. And I thought I knew a little bit about Jesus. I mean, I studied the scriptures at Notre Dame, you know, had my youth group at Cabrini. We knew about Jesus. And so when she told us the day, that after the end of the first day, that she'd be talking about Jesus on the second day, I mean, I slept well that night. I was home free. I was directing retreats about Jesus. We had adult education about Jesus. What is she going to tell me about Jesus? And I remember the words. This is the first part of Dead Man Walking, because it's the first part of my spiritual journey. When I woke to poor people is when I woke to everything else, but this was crucial. She said, Jesus preached good news to the poor. I thought I knew what was coming next. How every hair he had is numbered, how loved we are by God. Even if a sparrow falls to the ground, the person who loved God, God's so close, God's like, I'm like Daddy. And all of it is true, of course. But Maria Augusta said, but integral to the good news that Jesus preached to poor people was that with the community that he was calling into being, they would be poor no longer. Because you see, for a long time there was a kind of theology that if people were poor, well, that was God's will for them. And they suffered with Jesus on the cross, and one day they're going to have a big reward in heaven. But don't resist poverty. Don't resist injustice. We now have a huge gap that is widening more and more. I think the poverty level has risen within the last couple of years to 14% or something like that, while the wealthy are going off the other end of the spectrum. What has that got to do with our faith and what we do when we come around Eucharist to remember Jesus and his love for us? What has that got to do with it? And before I heard this talk, and before I got it about Jesus, that they would be poor no longer means it's not God's will that some of us are poor and some of us have more than we need. And when we come into the presence of that suffering, and when we come into the presence of that injustice, we cannot be neutral. And the kind of community Jesus set up was that everybody was treated with dignity. So women were part of the community. Children weren't even considered persons in first century Palestine. Everybody had a lot of kids so that they could all work in the fields and maybe they wouldn't starve that year. And Jesus holds up a little child and said, whoever receives a little one receives me. He used to call his disciples children because to you was given the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. And you know, the rabbis of his day would have these very esoteric, controversies and debates about what was the greatest commandment, and quoting the Torah. And Jesus talked about seeds growing, and Jesus talked about rain and how we can determine the weather. And Jesus talked about birds, and Jesus talked about lilies. You look at all the references that Jesus to earth, because Jesus was a man of the earth. He lived close to earth, and he lived close to the people. And the very first thing he did was put his apostles on the road to go out to the people. They didn't set up a little center where they're going to have a little mega church. Jesus, well, if you're really lucky, you get to see Jesus, but you've got to make your way through all the little bureaucrats. This is where we collect, your contribution to the church. Everybody was on the road going out to the people. That's the kind of community. It was very radical. It was so radical. We'd be shocked today to have people coming together, because those who had more than they needed shared with those who didn't have enough. The first Eucharist was the first part of it was feeding poor people. That was the first part of the meal. Remember that time Paul got a little angry at the Corinthians and says, you who are rich, you have your home for eating. This is for poor people. Because we were doing it. For 300 years, we did it. We followed Jesus. And then things happen. The institution moves in. And the more we became an institution, the easier it was to lose that fire and that spirit. But there have always been those, and I'm very privileged because I've traveled, I crisscross this country, and I get to meet the communities all across this nation that are making the gospel of Jesus become real. There are little groups of peace and justice. There are little consistent life groups taken all across this country. The gospel of Jesus has always been invitational, and it's never a big mob thing in the stadium. It's groups, it's individuals, finally, each of us that hears and then begins to put it into action in our life. So when I left Terre Haute, I got it that Jesus was on the side of the poor, and I didn't even know any poor people. And I'm living right there in New Orleans, juxtaposed right next to one of the housing projects. I didn't make a whole lot of decisions, but I made one big one. And the first one is just to go to where poor people were. So I began to volunteer, go on the bus, and go down into the inner city. And lo and behold, when you get there, when you wake up, you find there are already people a long way before you. There was Sister Laura Schiff. She'd been there since '69 at a place called Hope House, living there with African-American people as her neighbors. She got it about the mystical body. She got it that we're all supposed to be one body. She was teaching at an academy. And she goes, but why aren't we all one? And she goes and begins to live among the people of St. Thomas. So when I go, we're always standing on each other's shoulders. And if it's while I was there, living with people, and I tell you that story in Debbie Walk, and I tell you about living with people who used to be our servants. And now I'm sitting at the feet of people. I'm hearing their stories. And it was their suffering and the injustice of what was happening to them. The way the police were beating people up. Not all policemen. Most policemen are good, but there was against young black males especially. I'm learning everything from a different point of view of people who are poor. I'm working at the Adult Learning Center where kids who were going to the public high school, when they had dropped out of school, this is where you can come and get your GED. I'd gone to St. Joseph Academy. That was such an excellent school. I knew public speaking by the time I was a junior. My leadership skills were developed. I knew how to read. I knew how to critique. I knew how to write. So one day when I'm ready to write a book, I know how to write. And here are kids stumbling into the Adult Learning Center. Well, I want to get my GED. Well, how far did you get in school? Well, I was a junior. Well, you were a junior in high school. You only had one more year. Look, let's give you an individual test to see where your reading level is, where your math level is. We can work with you individually. And here is this kid who was a junior in high school, and he could not read a third grade book. He could not read. And I thought, why was I given such a good school? Why was I given such a good education? There were books in our house. There was professional people in our house. People came over to our house for dinner, bishops and priests, and people my daddy knew in the business community there in Baton Rouge. This kid has never seen a book in his house. He can't read. And in one more year, they were just going to bump him out. He'd have a certificate, and he can't read. And what it brought me up against, for the first time in my life, was not that I was so virtuous. It's just I was so protected. I was so cushioned. And so everywhere I'm looking, I'm learning. And I'm ready now for the lives of the saints. We read the lives of the saints when we're ready for them. So I read Martin Luther King. I read about Gandhi. I read about Dorothy Day and the Catholic worker movement and being among the poor in New York, because I'm ready for it now. And as I would come to an awareness of something, I would just try to act it out in my life. And it's while I was there, in those days at Hope House, that coming down the street one day, here is somebody from the Louisiana Coalition of prisons. I haven't been in a prison. What do I know about prisons? But I'm learning about all of the issues and how connected they are. And here comes a friend of mine from that office, and he says, hey, Sister Helen, you want to be a pen pal somebody on death row? He had a little clipboard. And anybody he saw that day, he's inviting him to be, hey, you want to be a pen pal? You want to be a pen pal? Yeah, sure, I'll be a pen pal with somebody on death row. I was thinking, well, you know, I was an English major. I could write some nice letters. I never dreamed they were going to kill this person. It was 1982. We hadn't had an execution in Louisiana in over 20 years. There had been a hiatus on all executions in the United States for 20 years. We thought we were ending the death penalty. When the Supreme Court in the Furman decision in '72 declared the death penalty unconstitutional, but they put it back in '76. Had I noticed? I didn't even notice that the death penalty had been put back. It didn't affect me. And here's the name of the man on death row, and I write him a letter. You know what the problem was? He wrote that. I'd never addressed an envelope that had as the address death row. I mean, that's depressing to get your mail. I mean, even if you're on Avenue A, Liberty Street's nice, but death row. And he wrote back. And you know, he never asked me for anything. He was just glad somebody had found him. He said, "Sister, pray for me." And it's so good to get you this. And so the unfurling, the opening, happened here. The letters going back and forth. I'm telling him about work at Hope House. He's telling me about living in a cell 6 feet by 8.5 feet where he's confined 23 hours a day. Just very matter of fact. It's not saying, "Oh, poor me," or he wasn't saying I'm innocent either. I presumed he was guilty. I presume that about most of the people on death row. My last book, Death of Innocence, is about 2 innocent people. When you read the book, you'll see what the jury never heard. Where the jury just has as a bar reasonable doubt they never heard half of the stuff because it was blocked from them. We come into a very human system, and it is very frail, and when human beings get pressure on them, and they go for the death penalty. We have 139 wrongfully convicted people who've come off a death row, saved by Innocence Project's college volunteers who got into those cases. That's how broken this thing is. But in the beginning, what do I know? I don't know. I don't even know anything about how the law works. And then I was meditating. How many times had I meditated? How many times had we used it in liturgies? How many times had I sung about it? Of Matthew 25, I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. And I'm reading the words and I'm praying with the words, and the man has been writing to me, and I've come to the words. I was in prison and you came to me. And it just goes, you know what I mean? You had that experience? Well, when you're dwelling with the words of Scripture, and boom, there it is. I wrote Pat a letter. I said, "I'll come see you sometime." He was so excited. A visitor. When you get up in the same place every day, look at the same walls, deprived of every kind of sensory experience, and someone says, "I'll come and see you." What a visitor means. So right away in the return mail, here are all the visitor forms. And again, they had, well, you know, you don't just say, "I want to visit." You know, you're in a category of visitor, like you're a relative, your wife, a girlfriend, a friend. And he had written simply, "Well, I'm Catholic and you're a nun. Would you be my spiritual advisor?" Fill it in, spiritual advice. I have no felonies. I filled in all the little form. Send it in. There's a sneakiness in God. I don't know if you know that. Just write a letter, you know. Just write a letter here. "Oh, you be a spiritual advisor? Okay. Be a spiritual advisor." 2 years later, I had no way of knowing that the state of Louisiana is going to electrocute Patrick to death in the electric chair. And they're going to do it at midnight. And at 5:45 in the evening, everybody has to leave the death house. The lawyers, everyone, except the spiritual advisor. It was going to be me. And that I will be with him, and that I will walk with him, and that he will look at my face when Louisiana kills him. And that it's going to change my whole life. And so anyway, I fill out spiritual advisor. I go to visit him, and I take you through this in Dead Man Walking. It's written as a journey. It's in the present tense. So what happens as I experience it, I open it up for you. Because you know, when we do narratives, when we do storytelling, I'm not preaching at you saying, "Hey, I'm against death penalty. You Christian, you ought to be against death penalty." Just like, let me tell you what happened to me. Here's what happened when I visited him. Here's what happened when the guards brought him in for the first time, And I had been nervous about meeting him because I'd never been with somebody who had been convicted of murder. And for 2 hours, and I was thinking, are we going to be able to hear like a normal conversation? And I was nervous because I was thinking, anybody can write nice letters, you know? We write the nice letters, how we use Sister Helen, God bless you, Sister Helen, and all that sweet stuff. Now I'm going to be with this man. I'm going to talk with this man. Like, will he look different? Do people who murder other people, do their eyes have like a glint, or is their jaw? Are we going to be able to have a normal conversation? And the guards bring him in. He's locked on the other side of the screen in a little booth. And I was shocked when I saw his face. I was unprepared. I had expected this harsh, you know, rigid. And he was so human. His face was so human. He was smiling and he said, "Sister, you made that drive. You drove all that way. Thank you. Thank you for coming to see me." I was so taken aback by his humanness. And I thought, that moment was a moment of great grace. You know, contemplation into the deep mysteries of life doesn't just happen with way on retreat, floating with God. It happens right in the midst of life. And this was a moment, and it changed me forever. Because I remember thinking very clearly in my soul, whatever this man has done, he is worth more than the worst thing he's ever done in his life. It was his humanness. It was his dignity. I didn't have a whole lot of words for it then, but I knew I had looked into his eyes. I was driving home 2 hours later, and I realized he didn't talk about the crime. I thought, wow, he didn't even mention what he did or anything. And I thought, the first time I'll meet somebody, I'm going to trust them enough to tell them the worst thing I ever did in my life. It was going to take trust. My job was to be faithful. And so I began to visit regularly. If I told him I was coming, no matter what the weather, I came. Found out he had a brother, Eddie, who was serving 2 life sentences. I didn't know what the murder was yet. I went, wow, that was my first legal question. I knew nothing about how the law was applied. I knew nothing about death penalty law. But I did have this question. How could there be a murder? One brother gets death and the other brother gets life. And the Saunier case, Pat and Eddie Saunier's case, was more complex than this. But did you know if you have 2 defendants and there's been a murder and there's no other witnesses, if one of them gives state's evidence against the other and says, yeah, he did it, they get a reduced sentence for saying that? And don't you think, if we're going to take into our hands and we can decide who lives and who dies, then we better have a way, absolutely, of getting the truth? Anybody caught in such a situation might say, yeah, he did it, because you get out from under the death penalty. And that is just one of the experiences. I take you through that in Dead Man Walking, of what, as I discover what happened with the brothers. You know, the movie of Dead Man Walking has one character, Matthew Ponsolin. Because Tim Robbins, when he did this film, he knew he wanted to take the American people into a much deeper journey into the death penalty than had been done in other films. In most other films, if the person did it and they were guilty, this was a punishment and it ended with the execution and justice is done. But Tim Robbins, and Susan Sarandon is the one who finally got him to read the book after 9 months. So she played a real part in making this film happen, because she knew we needed a deeper way to bring the American public into this issue. And Tim was very clear that the person was going to be guilty, because he said, everybody knows we shouldn't be executing innocent people. But if he's guilty, and we know he did it, then we bring it on. This is what the death penalty is for. It's precisely for these people who did these crimes. And everything is going to unfurl like this. And I worked on every line and every scene of that movie. And you talk about a spiritual journey. It's a movie that ends with prayer. Me and the victim's family kneeling down in the chapel to pray, because we got to take this to another level. And I'm going to end, and there are 2 arms on the cross. I'm going to end up being on both arms of this cross as I enter into the mystery of this whole thing. First, I was with the perpetrators, and I recognized their hiddenness, and I found out about the crime. I looked into the faces of two beautiful young teenage kids who had been killed on November night. We are approaching the anniversary of their death. They had gone to a football game on a Friday night, and their parents never saw them alive again. They went to a local lover's lane near a sugarcane field in Louisiana, out where Cajun people live, around St. Martinville and Yorkberry and Lafayette, Louisiana. And the kids were parked there, and these two brothers, it was all in the newspaper account. They were rabbit hunting, and they had 22 rifles, and they had flashlights, and they went up to the car, as they had done with other teenage couples. Nobody was killed, but some of the girls had been raped. And they come up to the car, the kids are all alone. And they look out the car into their horror, what do they see? These men have guns, and this flashlight shining in our faces, and these men saying to us, hey, you're trespassing, this is private property, we're going to have to bring you to the people that own this land. Do your parents know where you are tonight? What are you doing here? Then we'll look, tell you what, the girl has sex with us. We won't turn you in to the people, the poor kids. They never had a chance. They were found lying face down near that sugarcane field. Both of them shot in the back of the head, execution style. And once I read that and knew what they had done, then I'm there because I'm spiritual advisor to the people who killed these kids. And I had this hunch, I ought to go to see the parents. Everybody was Catholic in this. I ought to go see them. I was scared to go see them because I thought, they're not going to see me. I'm a spiritual advisor to the two people who killed the kids. They want to kill me. They don't want to talk to me. How could they not see me as the enemy? What? You're the spiritual advisor giving consolation to the people who killed our children? Well, they didn't have any spiritual consolation that night. They told them to lie down on the grass, and here they are shot and killed. And it was an act of tremendous cowardice and weakness. I didn't do anything. I didn't write them a note. I didn't call them. I didn't even try. Because I assumed. And it was cowardice because I was afraid. When I wrote Dead Man Walking, I had a good editor. I had downplayed not reaching out to the victim's family, and he caught it in the first draft. Jason Epstein said, well, that's pretty bad. I mean, not reaching out to the victim's family. It was a huge mistake. He said, it was cowardice, wasn't it? You were scared, weren't you? I said, yeah. He said, look, when you write your book, don't just take people with you on the peaks of the waves. When you do it all right, take them down in the troughs. What a mistake. And when I met them, it couldn't be a worse time to meet them. It couldn't be more polarized. It was a pardon board hearing, a public hearing before the execution, and the victims' families are all revved up because the prosecution has said to them, this is the last legal loop we got to jump through so you can get your justice. And that, of course, is what they promised. We're going to get justice for your dead children. And you are going to get closure. And this, when you get to witness the death of the one that caused the death of your children, with the promises in theirs, that will heal you. That will be redemptive for you. The word they use the most is closure and justice. This will give you justice. And of course, they're traumatized. And everybody around them is just saying that to them. Yes, come on, this is going to be your victory. Sometimes you see victims' families coming out of a courtroom when the death penalty has been given, doing a V sign like, we won. And then they start waiting. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Think of it. Think of it. I have been in the death chamber in Texas that has killed 450 people. And there are 3 witnessing chambers. Where the state's witness, one-way glass, they look out on the gurney. The victim's family has sent their representative, they're looking through another. And then the other one looking down into the face of their child on the gurneys, where mothers have stood with their hands against that glass and watched as the state killed their child. And that is what we are saying is the answer to violence in our society. When I meet the victims' families at this party board, the girls' parents were furious, and they had a right to be. I deserve their anger. And we walking toward each other, they just averted their faces and they walked by me in silence. And right behind them was the LeBlanc family who had lost David, their son. And here you go, surprised by grace. You ever notice human beings have a way of popping out of boxes? And here they walk right up to me, and Roy LeBlanc says, Sister, I'm Roy LeBlanc. It's our son David who was killed by those brothers. Sister, all this time you've been visiting those two brothers and you're the ones who come to see us. You can't believe the pressure on us for the death penalty. And I was shocked by that. I didn't know people were under pressure. I thought every victim's family given a chance would want the death penalty. He said, Sister, come pray with me. I pray in this little chapel. And here we come to one of the gifts of our Catholic faith. He kept vigil before the Blessed Sacrament on Friday mornings from 4 to 5 in the morning. And I drove across that Atchafalaya spillway to get to this place, St. Martinville, which is out in a very Cajun little town, to go and pray with that man. I had never in my life knelt alongside a family, a man who had lost his only son. And we prayed the rosary together. And it was on Friday, which is when you remember of the suffering and passion and death of Jesus. And I'm kneeling alongside a man who lost his only son. He brought me, on his own way across one day, brought me to the places where his son had been and where the bodies were found. And he put flowers there. But it's while Lloyd LeBlanc was praying that I began to get a sense that here was the soul of a man that cannot be satisfied with the vengeance. And it's why he was saying they put such pressure on us to be for the death penalty. His soul was never really in it. And I noticed as he was praying that he was also praying for Patrick and Eddie Saulnier's mother who lived in the town, where people were cutting up dead animals and throwing them on her front porch. And she couldn't go into the grocery store because she could overhear people saying in a loud voice, just for her benefit, I can't wait till they kill that Patrick Saulnier. Wish we could have gotten both of the brothers. There's that white trash woman over there who raised her sons to be criminals and kill those innocent kids. And so she becomes a little hermit and she just stays in her house. He prays for her. He was the first person I ever met. He's the hero of Dead Man Walking. I'm the storyteller. I did it all wrong sometimes. He was the first one who took me through the journey of a man that made his way through the violence into redemption of forgiveness. And the way he put it, the way he explained it to me was, he said, you know, sister, everybody was saying to me, Lord, you got to be for the death penalty. You look like you didn't love David. I mean, you have sustained the ultimate loss and you're going to ask for something less than the ultimate penalty? What do you think that looks like to people? You didn't love your son? And he said, I tried to go there. I tried to go there. I tried to say, yeah, they're right. I want them dead. I wish I could pull the switch myself. But he said, you know what? I didn't like the way it made me feel when I went there. Because I've always been a kind person. I love to do things for people. It's just who I am. And then I said to myself, they killed our son, but I'm not going to let them kill me. I'm going to do what Jesus said. And Jesus said to forgive our enemy. And he set his face to go down the road of forgiveness. And it is a road. It is a path. It is not one act. And God's grace met him on that path. And it freed him. He was the first from whom I learned, and there have been many along the way now, that what you do in an act of forgiveness is first of all a gift you give yourself. That you will not let your own life be destroyed by hatred. That the love in you will stay intact and not be overcome by the evil that has come upon you and your family. He was the first to teach me that. And after Lloyd and all then, I began to go to the victim support group, murder victims' families. It got my neck shocked. If the shock in seeing Patrick Sonia was that he had a human face, the shock in visiting with murder victims' families was how alone they were, that everybody stayed away from them because nobody knew what to do with their pain. And people told story after story, even people in my church. One woman said, even my good friend, I talked to her about the death of my daughter, and she goes, oh, Mary, you know, it's been a year. You really ought to be past that by now. We don't know what to do with that pain. And we need people on both arms of that cross, in every parish, in every Christian community, reaching out to the perpetrators and reaching out to victims and not leaving them alone. And I learned that because they teach me. And it's not because I did it right, it's because I did it wrong. And I learned from them from then on, whenever I took somebody on death row, I always reached out to the victim's family. Did you know that when New Jersey did away with the death penalty 2 years ago, that 62 murder victims' families appeared before that legislative body and said, don't kill for us? They are our greatest witnesses in shutting this thing down. They say, so we're going to give the death penalty, we're going to wait 15 years? Bud Welch, his daughter Julie was killed in Oklahoma City bomb. He said, for the first 5 months after Julie was killed, the only thing I could think was, get McVeigh. My feet would hit the floor in the morning, and I'd say, get McVeigh. I couldn't wait. I wish they'd let me do it myself. And then one day, when he's in the car, driving along, the moment of grace comes through the car radio, and he goes to touch the knob to turn on the radio. He remembers being in the car with Julie. And the news was on. And they were talking about an execution in Texas. And she had turned to the phone and she said, Dad, that's about nothing but vengeance. It's legal, but it's vengeance. You kill, we kill you. And then he realizes that to honor his daughter, he could not pay for the death penalty. He was the first victim's family of all those 168 families to stand before the media and say, I am not for the death penalty for Timothy McVeigh. And he went to visit his father. He went to visit Bill McVeigh and the 2 men in the rose garden in a bear hug and tears. And he said to Bill McVeigh, I don't want to see your boy die. God's grace in us is abundant and it is present. And we are called in the beauty of a consistent ethic of life across the board to be against violence in every form that it can ever solve any human problem. And in order to solve violence means we have to work for the alternative, which is what Jesus did. The communities we set up that reach out to the poor. The communities we set up, the homes we set up for women who are thinking of having an abortion but who are given an alternative. And I'm going to end by telling you the story. It's just happened to me. I visited a woman on death row in Texas. Her name is Kathy Henderson. She was accused of murdering a baby. The truth is it was an accident. She had always said, but she got poor defense. The media had her as the baby murderer. They went for the death penalty. They got it. At the last minute, in God's providence using humble instruments, we got lawyers and it saved Kathy's life. She's still on death row, but she's alive. Because it got forensic experts, which he never had a trial, to show that it could have been an accident. And so what would a jury, hearing that kind of evidence, knowing that it could have been an accident, would they have a reasonable doubt, not like they heard at the trial that it had to be murder? A group of us went to a restaurant And Kathy, through her friends, is the one who had organized it. Of course she couldn't be there, she's on death row. But sitting around the table were her godmother and godfather, who, when she had become pregnant with her first child, Melissa, alone with an abusive husband, pregnant, they had taken her in through Catholic Charities to have her baby. They're sitting at the table. Sitting at the table was Joe Ward, who was an investigator who went and got those forensic experts to show that it could have been an accident. Sitting at the table is her good friend Carolyn Burns, who has been a support and visited Kathy. Sitting there were other people. Around a woman that many, many people said was the murderer of a baby and didn't deserve to live. And we had a meal of fellowship and love, and Jesus was at the center of that. And Kathy, who couldn't be there, was at the center of that. And if you want to see the consistent life ethic right there, there it was. The couple that had helped her not to have an abortion and have her baby, and the people now who are working to stand up for the dignity of her life. The death penalty is tough. In the case of innocent children, they have done nothing wrong. It's easier to be for innocent life, but when someone's guilty. And I'll end this by saying the second book, Death of Innocence, talks about, one of the things, is the dialogue I got to have with Pope John Paul about the death penalty. I was only one person's part of the dialogue. I'm not saying some Catherine of Siena went into the Pope, changed Pope's mind. Okay, get it straight now. Get it straight. But I did get to have a direct dialogue with Pope John Paul. And one of the things I raised the question to him, Your Holiness, when I walk with a man to execution, and he's shackled hand and foot, he's been rendered defenseless, and he says to me, Sister, please pray that God holds up my legs. There is no dignity in this death. Does the Catholic Church, as the Catechism said, only uphold the dignity of innocent life? What about guilty life? And to find out what the Pope did, you got to read the book. I just want to end by saying, in the end, I was with Patrick, and I was there when they killed him, and it changed my life forever. And so my job, my mission, is to tell the story, to bring it to people, to say, think about it. Think about it. Think about the options of life that we have. If you are so moved to begin to act and join the groups that are actually becoming engaged, being engaged for a long time, and ending this thing, it is a precious thing for you to put your name on that, to become part of that. I'll be there to sign books for you. Whatever books you get, just know that it helps our ministry against the death penalty so that we can get the word out to more and more American people. There's a category there with the NCADP that if you're a Catholic, because we have Catholics mobilizing, working with the Catholic Bishops Conference to educate Catholics to end the death penalty. And I invite you to that. And one little last thing is that there are 3 books there that were signed by Susan's rendered me. They're obviously a fundraising book, and they're for $100. The rest of the books you get both of them for $25, one for $15, and I think I'm finished.